Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. And in my previous video, I discussed about the introduction to pedigree analysis. In the second part of this video, we are going to look at X-linked pedigrees and identify some common patterns of inheritance.
So these X-linked traits can be inherited in a recessive manner or in a dominant fashion. So first let's look at X-linked recessive traits. So I'm going to talk about some characteristics of these X-linked traits that we can observe in a human pedigree. So I'm going to switch to the next diagram just to explain these characteristics. So the first example is if an affected man marries a normal woman who is homozygous for the normal allele, then in this case, all the daughters will inherit the recessive X-linked allele from the dad. However, they also inherit the normal allele from their mom. So therefore, all the daughters will be normal but heterozygotes. So for a recessive trait, these heterozygotes are normal in phenotype, but they carry one copy of the recessive allele. So these individuals are called as carriers. So remember, this is only for recessive traits. Even for autosomal recessive traits, individuals who are normal but carries a copy of that recessive allele which causes the disease or causes the trait is called as a carrier. So in this case, when the dad is affected for this X-linked recessive trait, all the daughters are normal but carriers. Then what about the sons? So the sons will inherit the X chromosome from their mom. So in this case, the mom is homozygous for the normal allele, so all the sons will be normal. So therefore, if the dad is affected, but if the mom is homozygous for the normal allele, all the children will be normal. The daughters will be normal but carriers. The second example is if an affected man have children with a woman who is a carrier or a heterozygote. In this case, notice that all the daughters will again inherit the X little a, the recessive allele from the dad. However, they have a 50% chance of inheriting the normal allele from the mom or 50% chance of inheriting the recessive allele from the mom. So therefore, even if the dad is affected, daughters, whether they will be normal in phenotype or whether they will be affected depends on what the mom contributes. So therefore, you can see in their children that half of the daughters or roughly 50% of the daughters, I mean, if they have more is a different story, but we only have to look at what information is available to you in a pedigree. So at least based on the information that is given, 50% of the daughters become affected, 50% normal, but they are also carriers because they inherit X little a from the mom. Then the sons always get the X from the mom. So again, the sons also have a 50% chance of inheriting the disease from the mom. Okay, so even though the dad is affected in their kids, whether they have the trait or not in both sons and daughters is determined by the mom. The third example I want you to pay attention to is when the mom is affected. So for an X-linked recessive trait, a woman, in order to be affected, she has to have two copies of the recessive allele. As you can see here, they have X little a genotype. So this woman with a normal man, if they have children, then all the sons will inherit the X little a so that they will be affected. So for affected mom, if all the sons are affected, that is a characteristic of X-linked recessive inheritance. And then the daughters, in this case, again become carriers because they get the normal, the good copy of the allele from the dad. Okay, so these are three patterns that you can observe in this X-linked recessive mode of inheritance in this pedigree. So usually when a trait shows a recessive mode of inheritance, we see there are parents that have all normal kids, like in this case. So affected dad can have all normal children, or on the other hand, an affected child can have two normal parents. So this is called as generation skip, or we call this, it skips generations due to the fact that the trait does not occur in all the generations due to affected parents having the ability to have all normal kids. So therefore, usually in a recessive trait, if it does not occur in every generation, we call that, or that is a characteristic of a recessive trait. Okay, so these two individuals that I circled here, notice that they are not in this family. They are the two individuals that are marrying the kids of these two parents. Okay, so they are marrying into this family. So here it's a normal man, but with a carrier woman, they can have an affected son. And here both of them are normal, but you can see they have an affected son, and that is because the woman was again a carrier. So she has a 50% chance of having an affected child. So you can observe these characteristics in any given pedigree. You can, if you see these specific characteristics, that could be an X-linked recessive pattern of inheritance. So let's look at some examples of X-linked recessive traits. So I told you one of the common examples of X-linked traits is hemophilia. And whenever we talk about hemophilia, we cannot forget the inheritance of hemophilia in Queen Victoria's family. So as you can see in this pedigree, Queen Victoria was a carrier of hemophilia. So it says that this occurred as a new mutation in Queen Victoria. So she was not completely hemophilic, she was normal. However, she passed it to some of her children. So their son inherited hemophilia from her. So she is a carrier, but then she passed the X little h allele to her son. And then also you can see that there were so many other males in this pedigree that were affected or who had hemophilia, and this new mutation was passed from Queen Victoria to her descendants. So interesting thing about the inheritance of hemophilia in this royal family shows us that the trait appears more frequently in males. So you can see that Queen Victoria had a son, and also several of her grandchildren and great-grandchildren had the trait, and all of them were actually males. So this pattern, therefore, which shows that it's more frequent in males, but it's inherited via their mothers, is a typical characteristic of X-linked traits. Another example is red-green color blindness. So if you look at the figure on the right side of this PowerPoint slide, you will see a number in this circle. I see number 57, but it says that some people see 35. So if you see 57, that means you are normal. But if you see a different number, then that person has red-green color blindness. So this is one, they use several different tests to determine color blindness in humans, and this is one of them. Like they have this series of cards where they have two different numbers here, and depending on which number you see, they end up with a score which indicates whether you have color blindness or not. So anyway, this pedigree shows the inheritance of color blindness. And if you studied the characteristics of an X-linked recessive trait, we will be able to see the same pattern in this pedigree. So here, affected mother passes the trait to all her sons. And then in the second example, the affected dad passes that allele to her daughters. So the daughters are carriers. And then the carrier daughters, for example, individual number 2 in generation 2 is normal but a carrier, and she passes it on to her son. Then this affected man with a normal woman, but the woman is also a carrier. So we see that characteristic which shows 50% chance of passing it on to both sons and daughters.
So in this video, we learned about X-linked recessive inheritance. I'll see you in the next video where I'll discuss about X-linked dominant traits. Thank you for watching.